Throughout my life, I have witnessed society be extremely transphobic, as well as always fascinated by non gender conforming people. For instance, when I was young, there was a show on Spike TV, which was geared towards men, and they would parade out women onto a stage and they would have the audience yelling, like trying to guess which one of these women was trans. And hey, guess what? Most of the times the audience was wrong because you can't really tell. And it would be the prettiest person who was actually trans. So I've witnessed this in real life where men will act very disgusted by trans people, but then admit to being attracted to trans women. Like, for instance, there was this guy when I went on vacation. He was a white Irish guy, and in I've been to Thailand several times, and in Thailand, prostitution is pretty prevalent. And I am pro sex work. I believe that sex work should be regarded as any service that is giving pleasure to another person's body, like a massage, right? Human trafficking issues and health issues aside, sex work is work, right? But many like racial and imperialism elements come into play when talking about like places like Southeast Asia, where many white people go for sex tourism and they abuse a lot of the local populace. But this Irish guy starts talking to me at a bar, and he's like bragging about how many prostitutes he has sex with, and I was pretty uncomfortable because it's like I don't even know this guy. He just like came up to me and started talking about it, and I was like, oh wow, like okay. And it's something that's regarded as taboo to solicit prostitution, but he's all open about it. And then he starts talking, like he asked me like, oh, have you ever had sex with a lady boy? And I'm like, well, yeah, I'm pansexual. Like, actually never in Thailand, but here in Korea, I've dated women, men, trans people, and he got uncomfortable after I said that. And I was like, look, you're bragging about having sex with prostitutes. Like, what? I'm just saying I've had sex with a trans person, and it's like, so it's really sad to me that it's still seen as so taboo to find trans people attractive, because many times, like under that veneer of transphobia, you find that many people are attracted to trans people. Like another guy I met in Thailand, he was telling me, he was like, oh yeah, if you want to pick up girls here, you gotta act like this, but be careful because like so many of them are trans. And I was like, I'm okay with that. And he was like, oh well, actually I am too, I've slept with a lot of them. And it's like they put up this front like they hate it or they're scared of it, and I think it's a way that men try to protect their status. They don't want to seem gay because being gay is like lowering your status and feminizing yourself, and feminizing yourself puts you in the subservient class of women. So anything that goes against heteronormativity is dangerous towards your status of being a masculine man. And when we consider like primary sexual characteristics, so primary sexual characteristics is the sex characteristics that you're born with. So genitalia, like do you have a penis? Do you have a vagina? Secondary sexual characteristics emerge during puberty. So like facial hair, boobs growing bigger, these kind of things. So when we consider that, most of us are conditioned to find secondary sexual characteristics attractive. We don't grow up in a society where we're seeing genitals and we're being like, wow, this penis is so sexy, or this vagina is so sexy because it looks a certain way. I know there's weird spaces online, or I guess incel spaces online talk about how a vagina should look, or there's, I guess, size queens where certain women are obsessed with penis size. But the vast majority of people are not like that. Like, we don't see penises all the time unless you're consuming pornography all the time. We don't see vaginas all the time. No, we're conditioned in society to find certain traits in people that we identify as masculine or feminine to be attractive. So like in America, big muscles are a masculine trait and seen as attractive, and big boobs are so feminine and sexy, and these, it's also telling that these traits fluctuate constantly. They're different all around the world, like what's considered attractive. And we presume that these traits are inherent to the primary sexual characteristics that you're born with. So, like, a person cannot be pretty if they have a penis. It's obviously not true. Like that show I mentioned earlier where they brought the women out, or there was a dating show where it was called like Laura's Big Secret or something like that. I don't remember her name, but at the end, all these men are competing for this beautiful woman, and at the end it's revealed that she's trans, and she says, "I'm sorry, I was born a man." And it was like this, oh my God, like, how could she trick them, and disgusting. And I bet you more people than are willing to admit consume trans pornography and are curious and are attracted to trans people, because many men are beautiful, many women are handsome. Attractive people can look many different ways. There's a Victoria's Secret model who was very androgynous, and people just thought they were a beautiful woman. I think they ended up transitioning, but for a long time they were just an androgynous man. So even with people who identify as being very liberal, I remember there was this guy who was like very gay rights. He was a white guy out here, very gay rights, very like anti-Trump, all this stuff. And we were drinking together once, and he was like, he was even talking about how he kissed a guy on New Year's, and trans people came up, and I was like, yeah, I've had sex with many trans people. And he was like, oh wow, like, it's wild how like open you are and blah blah blah. So it was still like this novel concept to him to be open to those experiences. And I find that so sad, because it's like, it shows how much we dehumanize trans people. We see them as this either exotic or extremely taboo, forbidden thing, when trans people are just people. There's hot trans people, there's ugly trans people, there's good trans people, there's bad trans people. This is like my point with so many of my videos. It's like we compartmentalize people based on race and gender, ethnicity, whatever, but most of us are just varied and diverse within whatever categories we're forced into. There's good and bad people everywhere. A big thing now is like drag queens are being attacked as pedophiles, right? And it's like, in far-right spaces, they'll be like, the left doesn't want to admit that there's gay pedophiles. Of course there are. There's predators and child molesters of every gender, every race, every whatever. There's bad people in every group. There's good people in every group. So, another thing I wanted to bring up was, this was around 10 years ago, I was in a facility, and this group of guys who acted like they were very liberal and enlightened, a TV show called Taboo came on, and it was this couple, and it was a trans man and a trans woman, and they were a couple. They were together, and they, like, I never felt like it was wrong or weird, but all these guys who acted so, oh, we're accepting and enlightened, they started lambasting it. They started going off about how fucked up and weird and gross it was, and they were like, "Oh, come on, Timmy, even you gotta admit it's..." And I felt scared for my safety if I said, "Oh, there's nothing wrong with it." I felt scared, so I was like, okay. So I wouldn't do that now. I'd be like, "No, what the fuck is wrong with you? Like, they're happy. Leave them alone. Leave them alone. They're happy. And who the fuck are you to judge?" But at the time, I was scared. I was scared of speaking out, and I was scared for my safety. I was scared of admitting that I find many trans people attractive. And yeah, I think it's better to say, look, I find many trans people attractive. I find many women attractive. I find many men attractive. It's better to be open about these things, because trying to hide it just makes life hard. It makes life hard for yourself. It makes life hard for people like you, for people who are being oppressed. And yeah, anyone who watches this who is trans, I want you to know there's nothing taboo about your existence. It's really society and the people who conflate those negative stereotypes who should be ashamed, because the hate that we've allowed to fester in society is wrong, and it's oppression, and it is a poison, a disease that 100 years from now, when we have a more enlightened society, we'll look back and we'll feel the same level of disgust that we feel towards things like racism. Or I would hope people feel like that now, but I know there are many racists in the world. But that's my point. Transphobia is wrong. There's nothing wrong with being attracted to trans people. Thanks for listening.